Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start. First of all, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillors Toll, Wilkinson and Strachan. Are there any declarations of interest? None. The minutes of the previous meeting on pages 4 to 9, are these a accurate record? Are there any matters arising? None. Item 5, there are no written questions from the public. Item 6, there are no written questions from councillors. Item 7, there are no petitions. Item 8, the forward plan, pages 10 to 22. Are there any questions? Are we very disappointed with the word to Councillor Charles? Questions over?
Thank you, Chair. Page 22, the economic development strategy for Harlow. My point on this is, given the circumstances the country is in, with the vote to leave the European Union, something like the economic development strategy and actually all the work undertaken to look at not just the national but local economy here in Harlow, I think is now pressingly really important. Will the Chair bring forward this report? Because I think it's actually quite important that we have something like an economic development strategy in place quite soon. I understand, of course, that you want to do a briefing, and I welcome the fact you want to do a briefing on the impact to Harlow of leaving the European Union. But something like this, I think, needs to be brought forward, given the economic reality in the country and locally.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you'll know when we get to item 12 on the agenda that this specific thing is on the agenda of the Cabinet Overview Working Group to focus on this. I do absolutely recognise that both it is necessary and expedient, and also with the additional uncertainty that encouraging the business environment is important. I will make some reference to broader economic impacts at full council next week, but the details will come by the working group. Any other questions or comments? So the note to the forward plan, so noted. Item 9, recent decisions taken by the leader of the portfolio holder, decision by the portfolio holder for youth and community. It makes reference to a paragraph of a report that wasn't in the cabinet agenda, which has been circulated on paper. Councillor Charles.
Chair, thank you for sight of this report. I was going to raise a question just out of interest, purely because I was a previous portfolio holder and did actually approve these sorts of grant applications to voluntary sector organisations. It's just purely out of interest, Chair, and I wonder if this is possible. I'd like to see some of the submissions and see how their priorities align with the Council's vision. I take an interest in the voluntary sector in Harlow, and it's just a pure interest. I of course welcome the funding that has been provided to these organisations who are extremely worthwhile in our community, but it's just a pure interest, and I'd like to, just out of interest, have a look at it.
Yeah, there is that. Right, so no further questions or comments, then note to that decision. The portfolio holder delegations on pages 22 to 24. These are pretty much as they have been for some time. I think it's just a noting. So noting. Has someone got any questions or comments on it? Right, so item 11, the appointment of Cabinet Overview Working Group panels and partnership bodies on pages 26 to 28, which I will move this.
Seconded.
Already. Comments, questions? Right, so those are as appointed. Right, item 12 on the agenda, the Cabinet Overview Working Group or Work Plan on pages 29 and 30. And as I referred to earlier, the economic development strategy for Harlow is one of the critical items on the work plan. Are there any other comments, questions? Sorry, so
I move this.
wait, I'll take you to the minute. And I'll second that. There's a recommendation on page 29. Any questions or comments? Anton, do you want to? Yes.
Sorry, I thought you wanted to. No questions, but comments.
Okay, comments, okay.
Clearly, consistently on the performance report, the issue for us, I think, is we need to recognise the economic reality that we are now working in. I recognise what the Chair has said in a previous question about this, but I am, of course, very concerned, of course the opposition is concerned about ensuring that we have a prosperous local economy. And in the spirit of collaboration, I think it is important that all community leaders work together to realise the reality that we now work in. All of us are committed to strengthening the local economy, and I think that that needs to be reflected, and I think we all need to work together now. This is the reality, and as community leaders that's really important. So that's all I really wanted to say.
And I absolutely recognise that, and I'm sure that the Cabinet Review Working Group will, as it always has, worked strongly together in this area. If there are no further questions, I'll read on the recommendation on page 29 that the work plan for the Cabinet Review Working Group is so now we are on item 13, the year-end joint performance finance report on pages 31 to 70, which I will move. And
I second that, Chair.
so I'm not going to take very much introduction. I'm sure council members will expand on some of the highlights. I'd just really like to say that once again it demonstrates a good and strong financial control, making progress on performance indicators, and there are a small number hard in the report along with two action plans and improvement plans, but once again a good strong performance in terms of financial control and continuing in the right direction on performance. I don't know, might be anything now or...
Well, being maintained through the year, and the underspending of £812,000 is being carried forward. This represents a slight adjustment of the general fund. Overall, the general fund has an overspend of just over £200,000, partly because of the volatility of the business rate, and a bit of the uncertainty came from budget as well in terms of small businesses. And I think we need to actually be very clear in the future about business rates. At the local government conference, it was hardly clear the outgoing minister, unfortunately, because he seemed to actually have some very good ideas. So it's going to be interesting to see what the new minister is going to be thinking about this. But it could actually present quite important financial opportunities for the council. Well, I'd answer any points that are raised, Chair.
So, are there any questions? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Jeff. Have to agree that the performance is going well, which obviously we welcome on behalf of the residents. They are really valuable money. I am struggling with the actual numbers, whether there was an overspend on general fund or an underspend. There was about sort of six or seven different figures as to what it may have been, depending on whether you're including some movements or other movements. But at the end of the day, there was actually an overspend. So overall, it looks quite good. And then I started reading the report, and if I can refer to page 42, which is the Chief Exec's report summary, paragraph 2, I think it's line 6. I'll let you read it.
So I watched it as well, and and what do I have? It's the insert amount bit. I did raise a couple of days ago.
So I'd rather have it by now that somebody would have spotted it and have prepared the amount to be inserted.
Yes, it was spotted, but after the reports have gone out, and it's 20 million.
Serious questions. On page 50, on Housing General Fund options and advice, unfortunately, although we had a Housing Standards Board meeting last week, these pages were not available to us, so I couldn't raise the questions there. Yes, the second part down, increased bed and breakfast costs of increased bed and breakfast costs of £157,000. Now, certainly had this come up last week, I would have asked for more information as to how often we're having to use bed and breakfast, whether there are sort of families involved, and where we are able to locate people.
The classification and description in the variance report relates to temporary accommodation costs, not to bed and breakfast specifically. So that is a little bit of an anomaly. We don't put families in bed and breakfast unless there is an emergency. And we use 50% of council stock for temporary accommodation, 50% of around about 150 properties in council accommodation, 50% use of the private sector. But that cost relates to temporary accommodation, not bed and breakfast specifically.
Thank you. If it is actually temporary accommodation, then clearly this narrative here is misleading and unhelpful because I do try and follow these issues quite closely, and I was very shocked to see such a huge figure like that. So perhaps if these narratives could be a bit more tightly defined in future, I should be extremely grateful. If I can move on to page 51, interest variation. 85,000 improvement due to additional interest receivable from CCLA Property Investment Fund. Now CCLA, I seem to recall recommending about 5 years ago that was decided not to be used. I haven't seen that name in the financial strategy as being an approved counterparty, and I'm just wondering when the decision was made and what the property investment fund actually is.
Yeah, it's a public sector only investment fund that invests purely in property assets. The decision was taken through the Treasury Management Strategy to diversify the Council's Treasury Management activity into that vehicle, and we have been using it now for a number of months, and we receive a dividend on a periodic basis based on the amount that we invested, which was 2 million.
Thank you. Yes, I was aware of the organisation. What I'm concerned at is that we tend to keep our reserves or our cash holdings fairly liquid, and we seem to be moving into property, which is a major departure from the Treasury Management strategy.
The revised Treasury Management Strategy that was reported to Cabinet and Council back in February extended the option to invest in this fund and was approved and agreed. It gave us an immediate option to use that fund, which we did earlier in this calendar year, and this represents a return from that investment. The intention of the investment is that the return is really principled on the fact that it's generated from the rental income from property rather than the asset value itself. So it's the income streams that are generated from the fund that enable the dividends to be paid.
Right. Thank you. Page 70. Proposed end of the year earmark reserve movements. There's about halfway down the page the debt financing reserve, net movement of 750,000. to finance future costs falling upon the general fund in relation to borrowing. Could you explain what that's for?
Try to do it as simply as possible. As part of the 16-17 budget, councillors may remember that there was a savings proposal related to this budget that was brought forward and was accepted for 16-17. But this relates to the work that was undertaken over the last couple of years, looking at the council's MRP provision and the requirement to set aside funding to meet future debt repayment. It substantially reduced that from 16-17 onwards, but the figure being contributed here relates to the prior years.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And then finally, Revenue and Benefits Service Structural Process Review Reserve. It appears the entire, yes, that was created. It was you.
Suggest that if Simon has technical questions, that prior to the meeting, perhaps he sits down with Simon.
Simon's door is always
he'd be
open.
very willing to spend time actually going through any queries that you have.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I was away and only got back on Monday night to actually start reading the agenda. So I am scurrying around a bit at the moment. Yeah, but I will come back on that. Thank you.
Page 67, on the risk register there, if there is a lack of private sector investment and or disinvestment by retailers and landowners in the town centre, because I appreciate the fact that in the comments it says the council maintains frequent contact, as I'm sure it does, with landowners and so on. All I just wanted to know is what type of interactions you have with them and how regular that occurs.
Since we actually appointed a town centre manager, I think we've held he's held two meetings so far with the current landowners that we have been in regular contact with, but we also know that that audience needs to be extended wider, and I know that David is also facilitating that meeting, so it's not just about the current owners of the property, but also potential owners of the property that we can actually invite in.
Thank you. I wanted to ask questions around the overspend on the general fund. If I understand right, Councillor Danvers was saying that the reason for the underspend was because of uncertainty over the business rates collection. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Could you elaborate a little bit further for me so I can understand? Because it says that in the end there was a 730,000 net credit on the business rate, and by the time you paid across what you need to government, there's still a substantial amount there. And I just wondered why that meant that there would be an overspend on the general fund.
There's a number of things in regards to that. It's also the bad debt provision that's actually gone up quite a bit as well, which has caused us a bit of a problem, which wasn't expected to actually the magnitude of it.
Okay, yeah. So I understand the bad debt thing. Going back to the business rates, could you maybe just crystallise that for me a little bit more? Does it have anything to do with the variation in business rates at all, or is it just simply bad debt collection?
I think it was a mixture of both, wasn't it, Simon? What point is this?
Page 35 of the report is
I think there is an explanation, the whole explanation in the report. If you look at collection fund business rates, it explains the way in which the government have actually change some of the scheme. It was what I referred to earlier on in terms of the budget, in terms of small businesses. And paragraph 16 on page 35 actually gives you much more detail in regards to that. And then further down on 19.
Page 19 gives me further detail. That was the answer.
So the section that the main report, starting at on page 34, bottom, paragraph 14 to 90 on the following page.
That explains, yeah. I mean, I'm asking if somebody, portfolio head of finance, could explain it to me, because I've read the report, I don't understand it. So that's the whole point of this exchange, isn't it, is for it to be explained to me.
Well, let's have another go. The government's slightly changed goalposts. Sorry. Government slightly changed the goalposts. There's been there's been a lack of some collection. And I think there's actually been, in terms of small businesses, there's been the further relief that's actually been given to them. And in regards to bad debt provision, but I think in terms of the actual detail, Simon, can you have something?
Yeah, certainly try to. What we tried to set out in the report in paragraphs 14 through to 19 is as simple an explanation as we can provide for what is now quite a complex arrangement for the council in terms of business rate collection and the way that has to account for that. Essentially, back in 2013-14, we set aside a significant sum of over 1.3 million to reflect the fact that there was now large volatility in the whole arrangement for business rate collection for the council and equally for some of the precepting bodies. So we made our own reserve of 1.3 million. We've identified now is there's a kind of a time delay in the way some of that adjustment impacts on the council. So although we made a surplus, we budgeted for a deficit in 15-16, but we achieved a surplus. But we had a deficit to catch up on from 14-15 in the accounting for the collection fund. So we've applied the reserve that we set aside, but still left us with a marginal deficit compared with the budget that we set for 15-16. And so it's quite a complex arrangement. It spans more than one financial year.
Chasing previous years.
Yeah, and also thrown into the mix, which makes it more complicated, is the fact that we have to make an estimate of the impact of business rates appeals that might be settled in the year. We do that as part of the accounting arrangements during the close down and the preparation of the statement of accounts. And sometimes there are variations in the actual sums that are settled on appeal compared with the amount that we have assumed will be settled when we've set the sum in the accounts for the council. And that's also picked up in this variation.
Chair, we're not the only authority that actually suffer from this. Is that large numbers of authorities are actually suffering from appeals, and the district valuer is very, very slow in actually hearing these appeals, and it means not just Harlow Council, but councils up and down the country are actually suffering from delayed collection of monies because of these appeals. They're normally won by the local authorities. And once again, the Minister at the Local Government Association conference the other week, albeit hopefully the new Minister will pick it up, acknowledged this as a nationwide problem and is actually looking at legislation and also as far as valuation officers are concerned to see if A, the appeal process can be speeded up, and B, because a lot of them are actually businesses that are just, and sadly some of them are in the public sector as well, which I find rather difficult to accept, but there you are. In fact, for some local authorities, the biggest problem is actually with local authority, other like hospitals and so on, appealing against their valuation. They hold up the amount of money they can pay. They know that they can hold on to this money, and eventually they have to actually pay it up. So it's a complex situation. There's lots and lots of different ingredients that are involved.
I think it's been made a lot clearer. Thank you. I have another question, if I may.
Yep.
It's under the performance section, performance section on page 15, between pages 58 and 59 I'm looking at. In particular, the performance indicator BV012, the average number of working days and shifts lost due to sickness and absence. And it's, unfortunately, it's up, the number of days being lost due to sickness. And I was looking at the practical steps being taken, and some of the practical steps, perhaps they could be clarified though, because they don't really seem to be very practical in sorting out the issue. It says the council has implemented a range of policies over the past few years, including, and then it goes on to list them. That doesn't seem like a practical step forward, because if they've been implemented in previous years and they've not brought down the number of rates of sickness, then it doesn't really, I suppose they say the definition of insanity is to keep on doing the same thing again and again and again when it doesn't work. And that might be one of them. I didn't like the wording, and maybe it might need to be looked at. It says encouraging stroke reminding management to complete return to work interviews. Surely you shouldn't have to encourage your managers to do that. They should just do it. And it says continue to use absence management processes to reduce the number of days lost. Those absence management processes clearly aren't working. So those number of practical steps to go for, if they were the reasons given, that would make more sense, but they've been given as reasons to, or practical steps to improve. So I don't think that really makes much sense. One step that appears to be missing from here would be a review of people's working conditions. Are the council's working conditions such that it has an impact upon the sickness of the people? So I think that element needs a tad more work. Maybe it's just the wording, but it doesn't sound like practical steps going forward.
I'm not sure there's a question there, but so I mean clearly the level of absence is, as it says in the report, based on a number of long-term sick, and a specific point in here about ongoing management and support and long-term sick. I don't know if Brian, you want to add more generally.
Yes, I mean, as you can see from the report, particularly at the bottom of page 58, the largest problem we had is the increasing number of long-term sick. You can see there's the increase of 214 days of long-term sick year on year in the last 2 years. We can do so much with long-term sick, support, contact, etc., and we do a very good job. But we've got very little control as to when they're going to come back. We want them back as soon as possible, they want to come back. In relation to the short term, I'd call it up to 20 days. Some of these policies are newer than others, so have been brought in more recently than others. And I agree with Russell when we talk about encouraging reminding management. It probably wasn't the best words. The back to work interviews do take place. What we're trying to do is encourage them to be sometimes more robust, so it's probably a better way of putting it. But at the end of the day, we haven't got staff who are swinging the lead, so to speak. It is the long term that is the problem. Of course, there are other things we could do, but they would probably not be to the liking of councillors. I know other councils who basically stop paying people when they're not around. In relation to the last point that was made, remind me what it was. It was working conditions. We had a staff survey every year, and I remember being the staff survey to the Cabinet back in the last year, and we monitor what the staff think as part of that staff survey. We also monitor the reasons people are out. It isn't a case of, oh well, they haven't been there. It's why haven't you been there? If there is a trend, we look at it. Talk about long-term sick. If somebody has, I don't know, a back problem, we will look at ways of bringing them back by doing a desk assessment, if you like, seeing where their computer is, seeing where their chair is. So we do as much as we can. That's not to say that it's ideal, it clearly isn't. But I've come back again to this long-term sick point, and that is the biggest issue we have. It's unfortunate, it's sad, but there's not a great deal we can do about it.
question on this section, Chair. Thank you for your indulgence. Thank you for those answers. They seem very reasonable answers. So, I mean, my question would be now, shouldn't the wording, I mean, when you're inserting in the cost that the council saved over 10 years, having to read the document, would it be better to use some of your words, like instead of encouraging or reminding, be more robust? Mention the staff survey in here as one of those proactive steps. Because as I say, as it reads, it doesn't. Those things are very, very good and they're very reasonable answers to the question, but it doesn't come across in the report. And I think it should. So my answer is, Chair, could those things be changed and amended and included?
Well, welcome the helpful comments, and I'm sure they'll take it on board and appropriate considerations.
Yes. If this comes up next cabinet, that'll be rewritten. I'm actually mentally rewriting it now.
Any other questions or comments? In that case, the recommendations on page 31, A to C, and I particularly note the approval of the carry forwards and transfer to reserves in item C. Are we so agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. So, on to item 14, the housing revenue account outturn report.
Year, despite the uncertainties that have been caused by government announcements. The underspending on services on specific budgets has increased from £1.5 million in Q3 to £2.3 million at the end of the year. And the main reasons are actually set out in the report, but they include the increased vacancy saving of £300,000, the lower home loss payment of £370,000, and the additional insurance savings with increasingly having a purge on false claims and so on. There's actually, and Simon's done sterling work on this with his staff, of 150,000 local authorities have been subjected to false claims in the past, and I think those people are actually moving on somewhere else now because they realise local government's no longer a soft touch. So overall, there will be a variance of £700,000 at the end of the year once it's all totted up. Thank you. The housing and non-housing capital are underspent by a total of 3.6 billion and 3 million respectively. The housing variation is in line with Q3 forecasts. Non-housing variation represents a 2 million increase when compared with Q3's report. This is largely associated, A, with the Latin Farm delayed completion, and that's £700,000, and the delayed start and funding of the arrangements for the Fern Hill refurbishment, and that's a further 630,000. The underspend of schemes due to start or be completed in 2017 and 18, and therefore the request is to actually carry over these monies, Chair.
Councillor Perry.
Yes, Chair. Regarding the... Oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, Chair. Thank you. Sorry, my apologies. Getting ahead of myself.
No questions? Any comments? So the recommendations on page 85, 86, A to E, and noting the carry forwards, are we so agreed?
Agreed.
Right, so that brings us to item 16, the customer service review and action plan. I will move that.
Seconded. Sorry.
That was seconded. Just some brief introductory remarks. This was based on a fundamental review of customer services, and really it's a recognition both of the movement in technology and the expectation of a large proportion of residents to enable them to do self-service like they would do with banking and what have you, but also recognising that there are some sections of the community who are unable or unwilling to use the technologies. So it's really about rebalancing by freeing up resources for those people who can do it online and the like, to focus more focused attention on those who can't or won't. I would note that one of the recommendations in this report is the closure of the cash facility in the council, but that will be arrangements are put in place with places like the post office to enable cash payments to be made in the same way that people who pay cash would pay their other bills through the post office. And this removes significant expense. At that point, I'll just pause. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Very interesting, challenging, and probably overdue report. Lots of sort of quite good ideas and quite good information in there, obviously including the sensitive ones. If I can just got some questions on Appendix A, the action plan. Page 110, item 2, consult with customers. There's no actual cost involved in the consultation process, which would suggest to me that it's going to be an extremely small consultation. I'm just wondering what the council had in mind.
We're hoping some of the work we're doing with the LGA and the customer consultation, community engagement will help with that work. So it will feed into the LGA work. We don't anticipate there'll be a cost, but of course it'll be kept under review. So just
and the study that's been done by the LGA has been funded by the LGA, not by the council.
But, sorry, can I inquire as to what the nature of the consultation will be? And if it's being undertaken by the LGA, how specific will it be to Harlow and contact Harlow and in sort of channel shift thing that we're looking at?
So the work that the LGA are doing is not a general study. It's based on 4 pilot areas, Harlow being one of them. So they are specifically looking at customer engagement, tenant and resident engagement more broadly in Harlow, not as a general report. And along with pilots in other areas of general customer engagement will be used as sort of case studies and exemplars for the rest of the country. That's how it's being done. So your study question, how it's studying to Harlow, very specific. It's being done in Harlow for Harlow Council, just happens to be funded by the LGA.
I would have thought that, had we, the council, you, the council, been able to attract the LGA to come in and do this work, to actually pay for some of the work that we would otherwise have to do, there might have been some mention of it actually in the report as to, the support we're actually getting from elsewhere. Anyway, that's just a comment. If we turn to page 111 and item 10, total cost of savings, staff saving, there doesn't appear to be any anticipation of any costs that alternatives may fall to the council. Having looked at some of these things before, the main alternatives are things like PayPoint or through the post office, which have considerably higher transaction costs and also delays in actual receipt of funding. I'd be surprised that there isn't any cost for that bit of work.
Well, the report does mention that in year 1 it will be cost neutral, so the offset of the additional charges for other payment methods would offset the savings of actually cash handling inside the council plus the staff and all of that sort of stuff. Adding to that, but it does say specifically that it will be cost neutral because of that compensating effect.
Yes, in year 1, but they will be recurring for every year thereafter.
But yes, but there are recurring costs of delivering the cash service in-house as well. I mean, not just the staff to do it, but there are cash handling costs, there are other administration costs, and what have you.
On the same page, on item 12, it's probably more the way it's phrased, but it says, investigate further later opening, so the Contact Harlow team can have regular team meetings and training. So I couldn't quite work out how opening Contact Harlow for longer will enable staff meetings.
I think that could be worded better. So it's having Contact Harlow staff here for longer, so we can have team meetings. Having Contact Harlow staff here longer, so that we can hold team meetings once Contact is closed.
Right.
Yeah, I think recognise the budget wording. Yeah, it's not that the Contact Harlow itself will be open longer, it's that the staff will be here longer after it's closed.
Yeah, now you explain it, but you know that says it looks as though we're actually trying to improve things by opening Contact Harlow for longer, which I'm sure lots of people would appreciate. But if they only have the staff here for a longer period, so they're going to start meetings. Nothing at all to do with the opening of Contact Harlow.
We've put accepted the wording to budget word.
Equally, on page 112, item 17, the action is to move away to published emails on the website to forms and self-service facilities. So what does that mean?
So it means rather than accepting free text emails, is to have structured forms to get a better quality of capturing information. So on the website, rather than just publishing an email address, and you get a free text email which may or may not contain sufficient detail to deal with the inquiry, that we have forms that direct people to the sort of information, and that will improve the quality of the information.
Well,
it's standard customer service practice.
Why don't you say so?
Well, to be fair, it does. If they move away, from published emails, perhaps a typo on the website, to forms and self-service facilities.
Okay. And I presume that on number 18, where we're talking about e.g. Kia Harlow calls being double processed, you will actually be talking to the HTS program teams to make sure their systems actually talk to each other.
Yes.
Moving on to page 120, paragraph 3.1, penultimate dash point. It says, in Great Britain, 22 million households had internet access in 2014, up from whatever thing. Do you have a figure for Harlow?
I don't off the top of my head.
I can check and find out and come back to you.
Wouldn't it be helpful to know that when you're putting this report together, so you know what your target audience is, who can use all these new channels, and those who can't?
So this is just background in terms of broad trends in the UK. I don't think it's necessary to know a specific number for Harlow to indicate that there's a broad trend towards self-service and digital technologies.
But it will give you an indication as to roughly how, what your target audience is and how many you can actually get to use e-systems, and those who will need alternatives which don't. So bear in mind that there are a lot of elderly people who are tenants who may or may not have internet access, who may or may not use the internet on a regular basis, and all these sort of new systems will be totally lost on them.
So I take your general point, but this section in the report is talking about general trends.
Yep.
And if you want to get into specifics around measurements, when we start talking about the implementation of these things, we'll absolutely have to monitor and look at take-up. But so this isn't meant to say we're going to move from X percent to Y percent. It's talking about general trends in customer service.
on page 121, 322, again it's a piece of background information which is totally meaningless and totally irrelevant. It says Harlow has a high percentage of young people aged 0 to 15. There's no reference to young people anywhere else in the report. And the graph doesn't justify what the comment is, so okay, what is it doing there? That, that's a rhetorical question you would be to know. And finally, more of a, no, not quite finally. Page 133, paragraph 4.9, the report is providing analysis of other councils that this company's been working for, which clearly shows that Harlow already has the lowest unit costs. So, apart from closing the cash office, it's difficult to see how further savings could be made through whatever investment is required over the next 2 or 3 years.
So which particular section are you referring to?
Well, page 132, 4.9 costs. The average cost per transaction for Harlow is £1.13. The average transaction cost for Ipswich is £1.49. The average transaction cost for Oxford City Council is £2.22. And the average transaction cost for South Kesteven is £1.43. So I say, we've already got the lowest average transaction cost. So, it's difficult to see the justification for spending a lot more money when we've already got low transaction costs, and it'll be difficult to go any further.
So you look at the table for Harlow, and the difference between face-to-face, telephone and website. So the average cost of a face-to-face transaction is £11.44. And the average cost of a website transaction is 32 pence. I think it is incumbent on this council to get to optimise both in terms of expenditure, but also in terms of being able to focus resources on the more vulnerable. The fact that other councils are worse is neither here nor there.
Well,
Exactly.
with respect, Mr. Chairman, as I say, we've already got the highest proportion of website transactions amongst those 4 councils. At 73%. So again, what cost saving can we achieve by moving another 1 or 2% on website transactions when we look to be spending quite a bit of money.
So something like, precisely, 79.3% of our cost of customer transactions is not through a website. So there's £500,000 we spend on non-self-service. If we can move a proportion of that to a self-service website interaction, we will save a significant amount of money and add to the convenience of those who wish to use those services on a 24/7 basis. So I think there's always room for improvement.
Thank you, Chair. I accept there's always room for improvement, but I say, 73%, which again is the highest proportion of those 4 councils looked at, are already web-based. So I'm just wondering how many more we can actually squeeze. I have one final question. There is no reference at all in any of these reports to people with disabilities. There is no reference in any of these reports to an equality impact assessment. So when will the council be carrying that out before it goes any further with this major upset to the way the council deals with its residents and tenants?
Well, I'll tell you my introductory remark. I'll go and answer to things in a minute. But one element of this is to provide the facilities for those who are able and willing to use self-service online facilities. Those people who, like me, who have a full-time day job as well as being a counsellor, who do a lot of my sort of transactions, whether that's with my bank or shopping or paying bills out of working hours or what have you. But it enables those who can and want to, but that also enables a more focused personal service, face-to-face service for those who have particular needs, whether through disability or even personal preference. So it is about focusing those resources on quality impact assessment.
Just to say that will be done obviously before anything is implemented and will be considered by the customer service board when considering recommendations.
And council's equalities assessment panel, and the council's equalities assessment panel as well,
Yes.
if it still exists.
Have we got a secure system for this? Because I've had experience of fraud on the internet, and I've looked to have people complaining that they've had their details cloned.
I don't think anything has been made on a particular form, but I'm, in my day job, aware of a number of councils who provide such facilities. Harrow could hardly be one of them, very close to Harlow in terms of letters. But clearly security is a significant concern, and there's also very strict guidelines from central government for public sector systems and security of data. But I'm sure that when we get to that point, we will be using a well-tried and trusted software and infrastructure set, and it will be subject to the normal accreditation of public sector systems.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to the planned closure of the cash office, it mentions in your report under the background section, point 28, that it will require alternative solutions, which you've alluded to, for example, people using post office, etc. The cost, which is estimated to be similar amount in the first year, so the savings will be realised in 30 years. Upon what evidence do you base that estimate?
The estimate is current staff costs plus security costs. So 50,000 a year staff costs and 10,000 security costs.
I believe there's some estimates been made of the well-tried commercial models with places like post office for the charges that they make for receiving payments.
That's something I've got. Has anyone spoken to the post office and asked how much it's going to cost?
Not much in particular detail, but they are widely available, and I'm sure people provide things on the internet trying to do the commercial model. And I think that these things are, in terms of the broad parameters, these are negotiated on a specific case-by-case basis, but they are well established things that
We already use the facility for some of our payments anyway, so we know the current cost is whether or not if volumes increase, we are able to negotiate a lower volume price.
Yeah, that's the evidence then. Thank you very much. That's what I wanted. Moving on, in the further report, section 4, it talks about, it says on page 126 of the, 127, it says, some staff suggest that customer contact generated by the cash office provides the opportunity to identify other emerging needs or issues which, if left unaddressed, may develop into more serious problems. People are tottering off to the post office to make their cash payments. How is that side of things going to be addressed? Because that is a very direct, immediate port of call. We don't have to go on the website to find out these issues. Is that being taken seriously in the planned closure? Does that comment?
We'll still be able to do face-to-face interviews and contact Harlow if people need it, and with whole systems thinking, we'll hope to be able to take a whole picture of our customers and build up a picture of their needs. So I think there are improvements.
Through you, Chair, with all due respect, whole customer systems.
So we'll take a view of all of our customers' needs, any complaints, any inquiries, to make sure that we're delivering the service that best fits their needs. is...
I would hope you're already doing that. I think what the people in this survey in this consultation, this document, are saying is that this is a very good way of informing that picture of which you speak, and you're basically going to shut that element of the picture down. And so there may be people that fall through the net, and I'm just wondering how much weight you're giving to it. It doesn't sound like, you've answered the question, which is all I'm asking you to do. It doesn't sound like a lot, because you're going to try and pick this problem up somewhere else. That's what it sounds like. Moving on, in the table, you made some comparisons between the number of transactions undertaken 2015 and 2016 when the offices were open and closed, and that's a reasonable analysis to make. Has any analysis been made of what happens in terms of delayed payments, people falling behind when this has happened? Because we're talking, this is more focused on the number of people that are using it rather than the impact of that change. Have we done that assessment internally, and have we looked at other councils when they've made this switch, what the impact has been on delayed payments, loss of payments, chasing payments, etc., when they've made the change? Because that would be a very good thing to inform your overall decision, I think, before you make the final decision to close the cash office.
No, we haven't, but we can do. It's project progressive.
And I think it's worth noting that these things will clearly be under review by the Customer Services Board, and there are unintended side effects, and things will take action at that time.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's just you've tried to give some analysis to try and show that this isn't a problem, and it seems very one-sided, the report, as in it's not going to be a problem because we can pick things up everywhere else. If we're going to do that, we're going to promote the positive, which we should also look at the possible adverse effects if we're going to get a balanced view, is what I'm saying. There may not be a problem to this happening, but if we're going to make a reasoned judgment, we need to take a more reasoned and balanced view rather than the one that I think is being portrayed here. Because I pick up on Councillor Carter's point, it may be background, but if we don't actually know the number of people in Harlow that have access to the internet or other sources of payment, ways of payment, it seems like we're not knowing our target audience before we're going forward. This document setting out a vague direction of travel, I appreciate that, it's not the final document, but I would have expected to see within the document these kinds of things being thought of, even if the answers aren't readily available yet, so that we can be comfortable that the right thinking is going to take place before any closure would happen. And I think in that sense, I'm not coming down one side or the other on a view of whether this is a good or bad idea, but I do think this element of the document is seen lacking. And I think in general, I know it's a very big overall document that you put together here today, but there's been lots of instances where the use of language, the thought process hasn't been as sharp as it might. There have been facts not put in the right place, and it doesn't feel like this is a very sharp, tidy, tight assessment of the direction of travel at the moment. And I would urge that maybe more is done in the future to present something with a little bit more rigour. Thank you, Chair.
I note your comments, Councillor. I also note that the actual planned closure of the cash office is not until 2018-19 too, so there is some time to make sure we get this right before actually doing it. Councillor Charles.
Chair, has the council thought about having a customers forum that includes people with disabilities, people who use the cash office regularly, use that face-to-face interaction? Because I think that's one of the ways that we could look at addressing the consultation going forward. I mean, I know in the report that you've said, and I welcome the fact that we're going to have a customer services board and amalgamate that with the ICT board to look at these issues. And there's a lot in the report that I would welcome to enhance customer services, but particularly on engagement with those who use these services, I think that would actually be a helpful addition. Just like your thoughts on that.
I would hope and expect that item 2 in the action plan, which talks about consulting with customers, does that precise thing. It's about making sure we do engage with groups with different needs, based on whatever that is, whether it's on disability or otherwise, to make sure that we tailor the final solution appropriately. So, yes, I obviously take the point. I think yes, we do need to make sure that different customer groups and segments, their specific needs are addressed.
And just follow a question on that point on consultation. I think it would be incumbent on this council to set out rapidly a strategy for that consultation engagement and to set out an indication now of how you're going to do that and when that's going to be achieved, because I think actually this is one of the most important parts of actually getting this right, and it's just not reflected. I appreciate the action plans, it's just some brief bullet points on what is going to be achieved under each heading, but actually I think that consultation piece is particularly important. So we as an opposition would like to see that action plan on consultation accelerated and some communication from the council in the coming months about how that's going to operate.
I'm sure officers will take those remarks on board when the consensus board and the action plan is fleshed out.
Next question I have. One of the benefits that has been seen across councils is having an opportunity for residents to have a key contact when they have a complaint. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been and actually sat with Contact Harlow and recognise the excellent work they do. But I think one of the best ways to achieve better customer interaction is by having a face, a personality, an individual that residents can go to outside of their council and so on that want to report these sorts of issues to officers. Some councils have looked at having a local complaints ombudsman as such, not in such a grandiose title as I'm explaining it, but to have that focal point, to have that individual, so people feel that there's a personal interaction. Because I think those sorts of services that councils have done actually breed better customer engagement. That personal service, I think, needs to be reflected more in this report. I'd just like your thoughts on that.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to repeat something I said a little bit earlier. So it's about individuals will have their own personal choice about how they make contact with an organisation, and some of that's based on ability in terms of whether they're comfortable using the internet or whatever, and some is based on personal circumstances and what have you. So this is about making sure that those people who prefer a sort of self-service mode, so they can do it at in their own time when the office isn't open necessarily at weekend, which is where I do most of my sort of household administration. But that does allow then for those people who either can't or don't wish to use those self-service facilities to get a more personal service. And one of the notes in here is about having booked appointments to enable that more quality time. So I absolutely understand that there are multiple different sort of customer segments in sort of marketing jargon, and each one of those has different needs and aspirations and design. We have to work out how we address all those things. But I think it's absolutely clear is there is a trend for more and more people as the high proportion of 0 to 15-year-olds, as noted in the report, get to an age where they're paying council tax or whatever, who will want to use, not just want, but expect to use self-service digital technologies. So I do get the point. So when it comes to this personal contact, I mean, it's clear that's something that will have to be worked out in the detail. But hopefully by doing this channel shift in the jargon, to enable those people who can and want to do so, you then free up not just cutting down costs, but free up resources to focus on individual needs and those who can't. That's a bit of a long way to a sort of short question, but how do you get the thrust of where I'm going with this?
The next question I have, it's covered on page 106. And look, don't get me wrong, I welcome the fact that there's this acceleration of development of the My Harlow self-service portal. I think this is particularly important for some of the people that you've spoken about, Chair, and having that access to information online is important. I see in the action plan, yes, it's planned for 17-18 at a cost of 100k. Look, I'm very much in favour of these sorts of portals because it ensures people have access to information online, and I recognise all of that. But what I would like to see, I think our opposition group here would like to see, is the development of that action plan and to have a look at that and have cite that as soon as we can of how that's going to move forward as quickly as possible, because I think that is really important in terms of driving home the kind of customer interactions that you would want for a certain portion of people who want to use that service in the future. So I welcome that. The other comment I want to make, Chair, is I completely agree with what Councillor Perrin and Councillor Carter have said. I think we need to be very careful when we're analysing the do's and don'ts about removing a cash office. Obviously, Epping Forest Council is one of those councils that still has a cash office, and I think that that's particularly good for that community. But what Councillor Perrin has said quite rightly is there are a number of numbers here to try and justify the potential of getting rid of the cash office and making that saving. What we need to identify, and that's why I've spoken about consultation and having a forum for those groups, people with disabilities and residents who use those services and like to go to the cash office. We need to understand that impact before we rush to a decision. And Councillor Perry and Councillor Clark are quite right on that front, and I completely agree with them. To me, there are some good elements in this strategy, and it is very encouraging. A number of these initiatives, like the My Harlow portal, should have been in place a lot sooner. But ultimately, I think the only way this is going to move forward in a constructive way is to get that consultation right. And I know that you've recognised the importance of that moving forward. But for me, that is something that this opposition group will look at closely.
Thank you. Any further contributions? I need to go find where the... Right, so... So on page 102, the recommendation that the customer service plan at NUA is approved.
Agreed.
Generally, I do take on board the comments that have been made, and there are very, I'm particularly interested personally as well. Clearly, for obvious reasons, the IT element. I'll just make a general observation that the complexity in all of that is not the full story. It's joining up the bits at the back of it so you get the information, which is the complexity. But anyway, moving on. Right, so we're now at item 17 on page 138, which is the management operation of the Harlow Enterprise Hub.
But just on that, just to let you know, in the report, whilst I've been doing the evaluating of the bids, I've given you the financial offer and I've given you the business planning, but actually what I missed out, so I do apologise, is actually the tracking record of the three areas. It doesn't make any significant impact, but I can confirm that contractor A scored 60%, contractor B scored 100%, and contractor C scored 86%. So they were actually included on our recommendation, but I do apologise, I haven't actually put those details in the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Chair, I completely welcome this report. As ever, as the board member where this enterprise hub will be situated, the work continuing to deliver this is very important for the town. There's cross-party consensus on the enterprise hub and what it would bring to the town in terms of jobs and investment, and that's really important. Of course, the continued management of the facility is very important. The work undertaken here to ensure that that continues is vital to make sure that we get the very best result for the management and execution of the enterprise hub. So, of course, I fully support this report And in this particular circumstance, what Councillor Duncan is doing to get this off the ground for the enterprise hub.
Any other comments or contributions? In that case, the recommendation on page 138, that the tender by contract be accepted, and the recommendation can be that the co-terrorist lease are agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 18 on page 143, to do with the Stone Necklace Centre design framework.
Again, Chair, I'm absolutely delighted to make the recommendation as contained in the report on page 143.
Any questions or comments?
Thank you. I was rather waiting for some more sort of welcoming introductory comments from Councillor Durkin as to what a brilliant report it was. I thought you were wearing the shirt especially for it.
You know me and my shirts.
Certainly is. Some questions, if I may, on sort of slightly technical nature, but I'm wondering why they were mentioning that. One of the comments is about landmarks in and around the Stowe area, and there's a helpful map on page 161 which suggests that there is only one potential landmark. Yes, there are the key gateways as well, but as a regular user of the Stowe, I tend to find Moot House is not particularly landmarkish, or hidden behind the trees and set back and so forth. I agree, there are very few specific landmarks in as much as what people say, could you show me how to get there, or where shall I meet, and so forth. Although there is a reference elsewhere in the document to Darlington's, because it's all, it's a dominant site at one end of the actual street. It's been there a long time, and people know. I sort of throw it into the mix, but I think that's more of a landmark than Moot House is. If you want to make the report and document relevant and personal. On page 164, paragraph 363, we're talking about cycles. And if we're looking at a design guide for the area, I'm sure you agree. There are no cycle tracks to or in the Stowe. So what we do find is, and as is referred to a number of times in the report, there is antisocial behaviour with people cycling through the Stowe, and I think it would be helpful if the design guide incorporated some sort of steerage or guidance as to sort of how and where cycle tracks could go, which would be of benefit to the cyclists, but also of greater benefit to the pedestrians actually in the Stowe, who are sort of threatened daily by people whizzing up and down. Because there is nowhere for them to go. Well, that's what they do. On page 168. There's a reference to the parking square by Darlington's and Moot House. That's quite a busy bus route around there, and I'm just wondering whether additional parking on there would be compatible with quite a busy road. I know some people are parking on the curb already, and yes, it will be a convenient place to put additional parking, but I think it's one of those issues that needs to be borne in mind, but there is no actually reference in the document to it. So that anyone coming on cold might think, oh great, yes we can do that, and then go along there and discover that they can't actually close the road down for too long because they've got too many buses coming on. On page 170, the map again, item 23, new development on the car park site. That's actually a disabled parking bay. Again, there's no reference in the report, okay, maybe detail, there's no reference to actually reprovisioning those disabled parking bays or where disabled parking bays could go in a redesigned scope. I'm a bit surprised about that. And then finally, oh yes, page 178, the last paragraph there, 637, refers to removing the single-storey rear extension to create more space and enhancing the landscape treatment with adjoining pressures for car parking. Could you just elaborate on where the single-storey rear extension is, or what it is, please?
Okay, thank you all very much. I think you've given me 4 questions, or possibly 5, so if I miss one out, I do apologise. I have to say that this report was done in conjunction with the councillors and other partners within this particular area. So I'm not taking ownership, but I'm taking responsibility for the report. And actually in relation to the landmark building, Moot House was viewed by the majority of the residents when you actually asked them to describe a site or a place or a recognised building within that area. So even though you may have a different opinion, all I would say is that that does vary significantly from the majority of people who do use that on a regular basis, live there, work there, and actually recognise that particular issue. You're absolutely right. Cycling is an important aspect, and it is something with our health and well-being that we will be looking at and we will continue to be looking at. And remember that this document links very much to our development plan on our strategic overview, and therefore will dovetail into those particular areas as well. But certainly we will be encouraging people to come to the Stowe by bike, and one of the things that we want to do is make sure that they can park their bikes safely, as you've seen in some of the original pictures of the Stowe, that they can be locked in a safe and secure particular area on that particular thing. In relation to page 168, which is about the parking, of course one of the positive things about parking is that actually it slows traffic down. And again, one of the complaints that residents have had for a long period of time is accessibility. And one of our problems about the design, like most of these hatches within Harlow, is that they face inwards and they are surrounded by a road, so you don't actually know what's in there until you're actually in there, or for there is a specific thing. So we do need to assist the businesses, but we also need to assist the wider community by enabling and supporting access through parking. It has been looked at. Our officers are confident that what they are suggesting in this particular plan is appropriate, but remember, as this goes forward, and therefore if there are any significant changes, then that can always be brought back and challenged at the time. In relation to your 4th question, which I think is referring to 170 and section 23 about the long-term interventions, I can assure you that this council is committed, like any development of any parking, that actually the use of parking should be for everybody. That also includes disabled people. So that therefore, whilst this report does not go into the finite detail that you are aspiring to, you can actually have it completely assurance as part of the long-term issue is that a percentage of any parking that is produced by this council will include a percentage, a recognised percentage, to enable all residents to enjoy the luxury and the splendour of the Stowe moving forward by actually having appropriately placed disabled areas. In relation to the single-storey extension that you mentioned on 178, and I think you mentioned it was 637. I might need a few minutes to think about that one to actually have a look at a coloured map for me to recognise what that single story is. But I'll be delighted to get back to you. It does exist. It's just I'm struggling to actually find it in my brain at the moment. I hope that answers all the questions that you asked.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm really... Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm really glad to see this coming forward, by the way. This was something, the idea, the concept, as you know, when I was at Team Regeneration, glad to see it's been dusted off and we're actually moving forward with it. So I really welcome this document because I think the Stowe is in need of regeneration. I don't think anyone would argue about that. I think with all these things it's about getting it right, and I know this party will work with the administration to make sure that regeneration works for everybody, and there's been a cross-party consensus on that for a great number of years. I just want to make sure I've understood this right. When we were talking, Councillor Carter raised the question about landmarks, and you mentioned that his view was at odds with the majority of the respondents to the consultation, and that they were people that work and live around the area there. I believe. I've looked, there's only 14 people that actually responded so far to any consultation, so it's not by any measure a significant sample. And I know at least 2 of these people don't even live anywhere near the area, and they don't own a business there. So I would like to ask by what means the consultation was actually undertaken and how we actually sorted people. I understand some of them are self-evident, they own businesses there, or they've got a community association in the area, but I could see a couple of people that I know don't even live or work in that area, so I want to know how they came by the consultation, yet others may not have, because I'm worried it's a very small sample, I suppose, that's my concern.
Well, first of all, can I welcome your welcome comments over this particular issue, and I think it just reinforces the issue that whilst we're concentrating on trying to develop the town centre, these local hatches, which actually provide a vital service to our local community, not only in the basis that there are shops, but there is employment and opportunities and meeting places, are as equally important. And I know Russell does know that sometimes these things do take a bit of an age to get to this particular point, but I do welcome those particular issues. I can give you the response in relation to the consultation, but certainly I still disagree with you. It may have only been 14 people, but I think I agree with the 14 people that if someone asked me what was the landmark of the Stowe, and I think if we asked anybody in this room tonight, but we've given the game away, I suppose, they probably agree with me. But let's not lose that, because actually all it is a mere statement. It's only saying that was the view. It will not make any substantive change or anything to actually the key issue, which is that we can actually use this as a framework to go forward to assist in the development, assist in the planning, and assist in enabling for us to reach the aspirations that we want for this particular area.
Final question, Chair. Yes, I perfectly agree with the majority of what you said, Councillor Durkin. My question around the consultation was not what the landmark was. That's people's choice, people's preference. My main question is around who was consulted and how they were consulted, how we found these people. And I wonder if you're unable to give me an actual response now, could you give me a written response, please? Because, as I say, we're meant to be consulting people in the local area. I know some of these people don't live there. And it's just, as the main reason for that is primarily because we want to get it right and we want to include as many people as we can. It's not about whether the views these people have expressed I agree or disagree with. It's not that. It's I just want as many people as I can involved in the process, I suppose. And I want to be confident and ensure confident that as many people have been
involved.
If you actually look in the bulk of the document, and if you actually look at Appendix B, page 194, that actually also tells you the list of the consultees that we actually dealt with. And then if you actually go to page 199, that also explains that we held a consultation process between Monday the 1st of June to Monday the 29th of June. I'm assuming that's where, that was last year, I'm assuming that was where we got the 14 people from. But it's all in the documents, and it's my understanding is that the responses of those consultations can also be retrieved from this document as well.
Thank you very much.
And on page 175 is a list of about 300 different consultation events as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Tony, can you ask, is this going to be cycle-free zone?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, technically, the whole a number of areas should be cycle-free, but the reality is, how do you manage that and how you do control that? And actually, if you are bringing people in, but hopefully, what we are going to be able to do is that people will be able to cycle to a point, and that therefore that's where they should leave their cars, leave their bikes chained up securely. It's a bit like the town centre, that everybody knows the rules, but people have a tendency to choose to ignore those rules. So it may well be about management when we get to that particular point to remind people. But certainly we will not be putting bike areas within where the shops are. They will be on the periphery, so that they actually know that actually if they're going to come into the shops, they will have to park their cycle there and lock it.
One of your colleagues then don't cycle through the stone?
One of my colleagues?
Yes.
Oh, all right. Oh, all right. Then report that colleague.
So, have we got any further comments on the document in hand? No. In that case, the recommendation on page 143 that the supplementary planning document attached is approved. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Right, item 19 on page 202, which is the loan arrangements to HPS Property and Environment Limited recommendations on page 202. So I will move that.
Seconded.
I'll obviously take question. I mean, this clearly has been raised and discussed by both the board, which includes council representation of HDS, and the shareholders subcommittee, which also includes council representation. But are there any further comments or questions? Councillor Charles.
Just a comment, Chair. Of course, I sit on the shareholder subcommittee for HGS, and at the last meeting, one of the reasons why the loan agreement and the provision to go and do that for 1.4 million was some assurances, particularly over state aid and legal advice. I'm very keen to see the written legal advice. I don't think I've received that yet, Brian. If I've missed it, then I apologise, but I haven't seen that legal advice yet.
Chairman, I do apologise. I was under the impression that all members of the shareholder subcommittee had received legal advice, but I'll resend it tomorrow if that's not the case.
Yeah. I'm very sure that you would say, I haven't seen it, Brian. I'm very keen to see that.
Yeah,
Of course, my comments on this are quite clear. I've had a very clearly defined position on the move to this body. There are some major challenges to achieve before the HTS group becomes live and active. I remain very concerned about the ability to meet some of the financial regulations. We don't have a financial director yet. Of course, that's in the pipeline and that's to be achieved. But I would like to see that financial director sooner in post to actually regulate what was going on at the moment. Of course, I have concerns about legacy work, and when we move from the JV code to the HTS group, what will happen to that legacy work? I know that a number of big pieces of work are being undertaken at the moment, That to me is a great concern because these are issues to do with people's boilers and the transfer of all that work going forward. But of course, I welcome the comments at the shareholder subcommittee group from the new head of that HES group and the work that he's trying to do to bottom out all of that. But there are major challenges still to overcome by this council. The IT, making sure there's synergy with the systems, all of these issues are a major challenge for this council. Although there are work streams to achieve these sorts of things, in my view, there are major challenges to overcome. So I remain very sceptical about the HTS group, and moving forward as a shareholder subcommittee group member, I will continue to scrutinise this major decision, the amount of money that's being put in here. Taxpayers need to realise what's going on.
Thank you for that speech. Are there any other questions or comments on the paper before us? I'm sure you'll be aware, the Finance Director takes up post on October of this year. Right, so the recommendations on page 202, A and B, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, so moving on to the referral from the Audit and Standards Committee on page 205. And I will second about the adoption of the annual governance statement. Are there any questions or comments? No. So are we content to approve the annual governance statement 2015-16 on page 205? Agreed. Thank you. And then we have basically the minutes for various the minutes for various panels. This is item 21 on the agenda. Are we content to note them? Items urgent business. I've just got one brief comment. We are going to ask the Chair of the Council to convene a special meeting of the Council on the 31st of August. Clearly that's at the discretion of the Chair of the Council, but specifically to discuss spatial options in regard to the local plan and issues arising around Junction 7A or proposals for Junction 7A of the M11. By which time we expect to have had the output of the consultations that concluded just over a week ago. So this is just really a note for your diaries for the moment. I'm happy to sort of briefly talk about this subject, but the point is there'll be a full debate on the reason why the sort of urgency, by the way, is in order to maintain a timetable that gets us for full consultation around autumnish this year, and the local plan to have examination in public early 2017, and to get that synchronised with the local plans of Huddersfield, East Hertfordshire and Epping Forest. It's important that the council as a whole take some key decisions about some elements of that. There will clearly be reports sent to all councillors prior to the meeting. It is an important event, and I'm just sort of noting, I need to note the date in your diary for the moment. You can get there.
Yes, Chair, just to emphasise the point that you just made, there will be obviously full documentation being available to all members prior to that special council meeting, but there will also be a meeting of the local plan panel where obviously there will be an opportunity for lots of discussion and questions about the issues that will come before the special council meeting. But I know that some of the issues were already discussed at the last local plan panel, which was held quite recently, and obviously those issues need to be considered further in a much more formal setting, because obviously, as the leader has said, we are rapidly approaching the point with our councils that we are cooperating with in the smart area to arrive at a common decision about strategic housing sites and other matters connected with the way the town is going to develop up to 2033. So that's the reason why we have to have, or we're hoping to have, a special council meeting.
Happy to take comments. I'll just, prior warning, I really don't want to debate the subject in the round at this meeting. That's what the Central Cabinet is for, but happy to take the general questions.
I think I attended the local plan working group recently and over the last couple of years. I do feel, given the scale of some of the options available to us and the reasons why, it would certainly be beneficial to members perhaps have a briefing beforehand, so that questions can be asked without setting hairs running out like this. It's all so much way to understand it. So when we come to full council, we have a comment from a position of knowledge rather than ignorance. Whether it will be trying to get a panel for a group meeting, I'm going to be flexible over that. So I will also express my surprise that you expect a response to the consultation by, well, certainly 3 weeks before that date. Because from memory, you wrote to what's on Essex will be coming back with a final plan until that end of the year.
So, second, Mike, I'll come back to you. So on that very specific point, Essex County Council's plan when it came to small P here was to have the full output of the consultation prior to the next cabinet meeting of Essex County Council. What I've specifically asked for, though, is that while the full analysis that was presented to Essex County Council cabinet may not be available by the 31st of August, that we absolutely get a copy of all the responses prior to our council meeting. And I have some assurances that that will be the case. And we're trying to get some, to fill the gap between getting the raw responses and the analysis they're going to do prior to that. That might not be possible, but absolutely will be possible is we will be able to see what the responses were and we can form our own view about that analysis. Okay, so do you want to...
I'm just incredulous, Chair, is that we only the other week had a briefing in here. The UKIP leader was here. Large numbers of Labour members were here.
So Mike, just to be clear, what you're talking about is the Junction 7A.
Yes.
I think what Councillor Clark is talking about is the far bigger issue. It's the far bigger issue of the local plan. And Councillor is absolutely right. There is a high degree of technical complexity in some of the options. So, Junction 7A is one small part of it, an important part. I'm not dismissing that. And I know there will be a spectrum of views across the council on that subject.
Absolutely.
However, I have fully recognised the point you've made, Simon, that the local plan, there is, those of us who have been following it quite closely for some period of time, an enormous amount of information. I don't expect every councillor to catch up on all of the technical documentation. Even if you started now and just read it, it would take you some time to find digesting. But it is important that the key features and options and decision points are briefed in advance. Now, I'll consult with Danny. That's a combination of reports and the local plan panel, but if we can arrange a separate briefing, I think that will be strongly advisable. So I'll consult with Danny whether that's possible or not. But I absolutely recognise not only is it a difficult and complex subject, it is a subject that's going to literally
capacity as an old Harlow Ward councillor at this moment in time. Clearly the local plan is vitally important for the next 15 to 20 years, as you've just identified, Chair. And this is an incredibly important special council on the 31st of August, so I welcome the fact that there will be separate briefings and there will be information available for council to make their decision. I don't attempt to go into the debate now, but I simply put on record that I have responded to the Junction 7 consultation and I maintain my opposition to this scheme, and I will make that abundantly clear at Special Court Council.
Right, thank you. That's noted. I'm sure Councillor Danvers could make a very similar point. I recognise...
John, it's impression.
Look. So we'll absolutely have the debate at the special council meeting. You now have on record your opposition, and that's fine. And I absolutely recognise there will be a full spectrum of views from absolute over my dead body opposition to very supportive, and many other positions in between. But it's important that we have the debate before, and we're not having it now. So if there are no further general comments about the meeting, I'm not going to entertain any other statements on their views on